Hello and welcome to our annual, I guess it is, since 427 is only offered in the spring. If you haven't been with us yet, we do this every spring. The group or groups that develop games get to present their work, and the format's going to be pretty much, an MC is going to be Ben Rodriguez.
Rodriguez, that's fine.
I want to put an S on there. He's going to kind of oversee it, and the format we like to use is that each team member, in this case, pair of team members, is going to discuss the component of the game that they were involved in, and then we're going to try to tie the whole thing together and then a demo of the game at the end. And there will be time for a Q&A afterwards. So that's kind of the format we're going to use. And we hope you enjoy the presentation and appreciate the achievement. It's always amazing that any group of students gets this much work done in 16 weeks. We're very proud of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben and let him start the show.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everybody. This is as Jim said, the spring 2011 presentation of the 427 video game design class. It really is a short amount of time to throw together a game as best as we can. And I'd like to say that even though we encountered quite a few stumbling blocks along the way, we didn't have any major roadblocks, and we stuck together and pulled it through to the very end. As you can see, we've decided to name our game Chibi Z. It kind of runs in with a certain theme we've had throughout the entire semester. So let's begin. That's always good. Sorry about that. Let's see. So this semester we decided to work collectively as an entire one-class group. It had a lot of its different challenges, and it had a lot of its different benefits, as we'll talk about as we go through the presentation. The preparation for the class started out with us learning the Ogre rendering system. It's a fairly complex graphic system that most students coming into the class have never heard of or just heard of it in passing, but don't really know how to use it. Luckily, there's a lot of tutorials and documentation out there that allows you to go and start playing around with Ogre and getting a good idea of how to use it. So that was basically our first goal and task as a group early on in the semester, was basically understanding the system we'd be using for the majority of the semester, for the entire semester, for that matter. But while we were doing that, we also were trying to plan out how we would begin development. We decided, since we have such a large group, we could split off all of our group members into sub-teams, and we'd all have each of these sub-teams working on different aspects of the game. So the people that were working on level design were kind of separate from the people that were working on the animation, and separate from people working on, say, the collision detection and physics aspects of the game. And to reinforce that, we also set up in our game, basically, our system was a way to split off each group into their own state so that they could work in their own little sandbox and wouldn't have to worry about other group members influencing how they were doing their tests and setting up their algorithms and things like that. We found that was extraordinarily helpful and beneficial to accomplishing our goals, and we were very happy to have done that. So we came up with a game. We're starting to come up with a game idea at the beginning of the semester after the initial tutorial to Ogre, which involved a lot of brainstorming and ideas getting thrown around. We eventually decided we wanted to be combat-oriented. We wanted to have some kind of storyline to base the entirety of the game on, and we wanted to have potentially have quests-driven, even though we were under the assumption that, given the time constraints, we might not have that in. And we also wanted abilities. In most games, you have different magic or mystical abilities that you can use, and basically kind of flashy for the most part. So we agreed additionally to have experience-based character development, which we all agreed would be interesting to have it so where you used an ability, you actually got points or experience in using that ability. So it would kind of improve your character based on what you did, which we found was very interesting to play. Action-oriented gameplay, and then, as I said, story-driven quests. So the story development team was headed up by Josh and Paul, and I'd like for them to come up and kind of explain what they did. in that regard.
Hi everybody, I'm Josh Koda. I'm Bo Krasinski. We worked in a small group developing the story. Working on the story helped us give inspiration for level design, character and enemy design, and abilities in combat using the game. So, the plot of our story is that this human civilization were running out of resources on their home planet, so they decided to go into space, find a new world to colonize and live their lives. But they had conflicting viewpoints of how they wanted to colonize the new world. They had 3 subgroups. They had a group that wanted to develop their genes, genetics, so they can be more with nature. Another group wanted to advance their bodies more technological, so they can be more technology oriented, and then they had another group that just didn't want either way, they just wanted to live. So when they get to the planet, they see that the resources are scarce, so they have to keep most of their population from the ship in hibernation so that they could set up their colony. And they were planning on slowly reviving the people from hypersleep as they began to build up their resources. They built up scientifically, advancing their technology and genes, and they created a new energy source later on in their development.
So in the beginning of our game, you are a main character who is awakened by an extraction squad because you're still asleep in the ship that left Earth into this new world. When the extraction squad takes you out and you discover this ruined kind of area, and you start to learn that there's a war going on between the 2 extreme factions, the technology people and the nature people. And so you have to decide yourself either to go full technology or nature to help these people just fight off these 2 fighting factions. And that's all we have for our story.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Bo. All right. The next aspect of our game would be our gameplay. This was kind of the driving force behind of what you would be doing in the game. And I'd like for Brandon to come up and share a few words with you.
Hi, I'm Brandon Primo, and I worked on the gameplay and physics in our game. We kind of agreed earlier that we wanted something that was not going to be a little complex. We wanted a simple design with our controls, so we looked on the Xbox controller, which has a very simple design, it's not too hard to use, and it allows us to map a lot of abilities the way we want to map them. So it was also decided early on that we wanted to use physics, and that was one of the tougher challenges that I faced the entire semester, was getting the physics integrated, but also allowing other people to do their work without having the physics and letting them come in later with it. The combat system is the primary responsibility for our collision responses between our entities, and our players and our enemies are really divided into 2 different groups for our filtering system. That way you can't really hurt your own team when you're doing combat, and enemies don't hurt themselves, otherwise you could exploit that. It would just make for a really bad system. For physics, we used Havoc, and at first it was probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to learn, but after playing around with it and getting used to how Havoc wants things done, it really wasn't too bad, and getting it integrated with Ogre was not too difficult at all.
All right, thank you, Brandon. The next part is our artists would like to come up, Trista and Ashton. They were the ones who basically designed the majority of our 3-dimensional objects in our game, mainly our character models and then any buildings or objects just around the area.
I'm Trista.
I'm Ashton Lenore.
And we were in charge of doing the concept art and models for the game. I was primarily doing the character designs, character models, and weapons. And Ashton was mostly doing like scenery, objects, and buildings. Well, early on, after they made the story, I was trying to think of characters that would go along with the story that we created. As you can see here, we were originally thinking maybe we could have it where, since it was a settlement, it would make sense if there was like male and female players, characters that you could play as, but we had to dump that off early on. This is one of the earlier drawings, and we later decided to go with a chibi style, which was kind of an inside joke that went a little too far. But chibi is basically, it means small in Japanese, and it means the characters, like, this is the same character, a different design for it from one of the ones from the first page. And because of how far the camera would be zoomed out and everything, it would make everything a lot easier to make out than having this like super detailed, regular proportion model. This image is the three different types of characters that we decided on, the designs for them. The technology character, the neutral character, and the biological character. This is just the other version of that one. We used Maya to make all the meshes for the that we used in the game, based on the drawings that we did. And since the enemies and the player characters were going to all look the same with different textures on them, and since all the player characters and enemies were the same type of body structure, we decided to make, or I decided to make, one basic model and then derive all of them from that basic model. So we ended up with this, and we went on to, I put different textures because we didn't want the enemies to look the same, and we wanted to have it where you could choose, like, if you were playing multiplayer with other people, you wouldn't all look the same. These are the base first textures that we did, and then ended up with 4 variations for each character by the end. That was that's the neutral, that's the biological. He has like scales and stuff. And this is the technology character. These are, I also did the weapons. We had 2 weapons for each character. The ray gun and the lightsaber-like thing were for the technology character. The bow and the club were for the biological, and the gun and the sword were for the neutral human.
I'm Ashton Menard. I did most of the structures and buildings and various world objects. This right here is just the random buildings from the first town that you come into after being woken up from a hypersleep. Again, we use Maya to do all of these shapes and objects. This is just a close-up shot of a few different buildings. Maya has a Overtor plugin in it that made exporting the various files very easy. So while there was a great deal of fine-tuning and tweaking back and forth between the 2 programs, it made working between them that much easier that we could easily flip between the 2. This is the power plant, as well as some random objects that you'll find throughout the world right here. And again, a few more just random objects that you'll find scattered throughout the world as you're going out and exploring. Right here is just a enemy spawner that you'll find throughout the world. The enemies are just set to spawn from these points or should, and whatnot.